first preliminary skills that you have to have, especially when you're dealing with the more quantitative side of sciences, is figuring out how you can take measurable quantities and connect them together into mathematical equations. Now, typically speaking, this is done by introducing variables, which are symbols. Typically, they take the form of letters to represent the fact that they are non-numeric, and to arrange them into equations that describe what you've been told in words. And what you'll find is every equation that you're going to encounter actually can be translated into a literal sentence. And that's one of the things that you need to be able to do in order to properly make sense of a lot of things that we're going to talk about. Now, for the purpose of this preliminary module, one thing that you need to be able to do is you need to be able to go back and forth between words and mathematical quantities. So here's a fairly typical example in which a situation has been described to you, and this one is pulled right out of population dynamics and ecology. And what we're going to do is we're going to translate this paragraph into a mathematical equation that we can then use to solve for different things. So what this basically says is if you go about and you measure the growth rate, there's a second growth rate here, so you can just get rid of this second that doesn't need to be there. But if you go out and measure the growth rate of a prey species, what you can find is that the growth rate of this particular prey species can be determined by looking at the difference between 3 times the number of prey animals and the number of predator animals for a fixed time period. Now, using this information, what you might want to be able to do is to create an equation that relates this growth rate of prey animals to the number of both prey and predator animals. So this is a pretty typical example, and if you've taken genetics, almost every equation or relationship that you have therein is basically done by relating observations to mathematical quantities. Now, we're going to do this in a very basic form. What we've been asked to do is we've been asked to relate the growth rate to the number of both prey and predator animals. So if you take a look at what you've been asking, we want to relate 3 things that we don't know together. The first here is the growth rate that we've been asked for, and the second things are the numbers of prey and predator animals. Now here there are 3 things that you don't know. You don't have a number for the growth rate, you don't have a number for the number of prey animals, and you don't have a number for the number of predator animals. The minute you've identified that, what that is suggesting is that whatever equation you are going to construct is going to contain 3 variables to deal with the 3 quantities you don't know. Now, the symbol you pick is up to you. Really doesn't make a difference. So we're going to use G here for the growth rate that we're trying to find. Let's use capital P for the number of prey animals. And let's use lowercase p for the number of predator animals. These are the 3 things that we've been asked to relate. Now, when it comes to relating them together, what we need to do is we need to take a look at what we've been told about how they've been related together. So if you take a look at the very first paragraph here, you're told a number of relevant things. First of all, you're told quite explicitly that the growth rate can be found, which implies that the next part of the sentence is going to tell you how to calculate G. And in terms of calculating G, you're told that we're going to be taking the difference between 3 times the number of prey animals and the number of predator animals. So each one of these different color underline is telling you something different. The first one is telling you that we can find the growth rate by doing something. In other words, that red thing there is telling you that G is going to be equal to whatever follows it. Now, the orange thing here is telling us we're going to be taking the difference between 2 things. The word difference literally implies that we're going to be using a subtraction operator. Now, when it comes to taking a difference, you need to know what you're taking a difference between. So what we're told next up in blue here is that we're taking the difference between 3 times the number of prey animals, so 3 capital P, because P is the number of prey animals, and the number of predator animals, which we've had for lowercase p. So everything that's written to here in words is actually telling us how we can construct the equation that we're going to need. And for this equation, if we wanted to write it all out at once, we'd say G is 3p minus little p. And this is how all of these types of equations are created. So every time you see an equation in this class or in any other instance, it's actually translatable into words. And being able to identify that is a skill that you need to possess.